Hi, I'm George Laughton, and I helped Chris Peach purchase his first investment property. Let me tell you, we definitely stayed on budget with this one. So first, check this out.
Why doesn't everybody do this?
I don't know. It's what I always tell people to do, right? I don't know. People don't understand that they're not treating their work as a business. They're just going about it from paycheck to paycheck, just like a lot of people do. It's closing to closing. But I wanted to have something sellable, something duplicatable in the end. I wanted something also to pay me when I was on vacation. I wanted to still make money when I wasn't around.
What's up, everyone? Chris Peach here, and I just want to take a second to say thank you so much for listening to the Money Peach podcast. This week, we are taking a week off, but I'm going to be bringing you one of my favorite episodes as a replay. This goes back to episode 42 with George Laughton. Now, George is a good friend of mine. He's a real estate agent. No, I should say he's a real estate megastar here in Arizona. And he's also in one of my mastermind groups. One thing I like about George is he has had a massive effect on my own life in the terms of my morning routines. And that's one of the things we talked about in this episode is how to develop strong morning routines and what George does on a daily basis to keep him focused. You're going to get a lot out of this. And many of you who have heard this before have already implemented a lot of the things that George does on a daily basis. So without further ado, let me bring on my good friend, George Laughton, who first made his debut back on episode 42 of the Money Peach podcast. All right, George, thank you so much for coming on the Money Peach podcast. Been trying to get you on this show for a while. Like many of the guests on the show, I met you at the gym. Right away, was really impressed, not with just what we're going to talk about with business sense, but we're going to also talk about your involvement in the community. I mean, you are highly, highly involved inside the community. You go, I would say, above and beyond inside the community, inside your business. And so there's just, you're unique. You're very unique. You're a real estate agent. I should get that out of the way. So we're going to talk about all of that, but nothing was handed to you. I know we've talked about this before. You've had to work for everything and you've had a lot of success along the way. So those listening to this are thinking, what makes George tick? How did he go from where to where you're at today? And how can we mimic that, maybe replicate that in our own lives? So how's that for an introduction?
That's great, man.
All right.
I love it. Yeah.
So tell us a little about yourself, who you are, what you do for work right now, and we'll just go from there.
Okay. Well, first of all, man, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I've been a long-time listener of the podcast, so love the content you're putting out and love what you're doing. So thanks for that. Who we are, married, 2 handsome little boys, 5 and 2 years old. So that's first and foremost kind of what defines me. And then I run a real estate company here in Phoenix. I have a team of about 30 agents, admin, probably about 40 total people. And we just run a successful real estate team, helping people buy or sell houses.
Simple enough, right?
Yeah, pretty simple.
Okay, so
I can overcomplicate it for you.
All right, so for those listening right now, before we go any further, just keep in mind he's very, very humble. It's not just a simple real estate team. It's one of the best in the entire United States. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. But let's go back to, where did you start then? So I know you grew up kind of in 2 locations. Kind of tell me about where you started growing up, as far as you had mentioned earlier with your parents and that lifestyle.
Yeah, so early on in life, like a lot of people, my parents got divorced. My mom moved to Oklahoma. My dad stayed here. So I was always kind of bouncing back and forth between the two. But I spent a lot of my formative years in Oklahoma, a really, really small farm town, about 600 people, just to kind of give you an idea, right? It was 4 blocks long, who lives in every house and who lived there before them.
What was the name of the town?
Freedom, Oklahoma.
Okay, Freedom, Oklahoma. Now we have to look that up.
Home of the biggest open rodeo in the West.
Really?
Everybody wants to go out every August, third weekend in August. So I get invited back every year, but my wife won't let me take her for our 1-week vacation a year.
No.
Yeah, she opts for St. Thomas. So
absolutely.
So yeah, 600 people in town. That's where I went to school. I mean, driving tractors, fixing fence, riding horses, rodeo and roping, stuff like that. So that's kind of how I grew up. Got away from that, a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing and stuff, but graduated with 13 people in my class. So yeah, it was a really, really small town.
So you had 13 people in your graduating class?
13 people in my graduating class.
Okay. And I already know the answer, but I know you're humble enough, you're not going to say it. Where did you rank out of your 13?
Well, I was valedictorian, but...
which is kind of like, there's like 13 people.
So you just don't quote the stat on how large the class
perfect.
was. You just say, okay. No, I was valedictorian. Nobody argues that. I still got an academic scholarship,
Heck
right?
Yeah, you did.
there's that.
Okay. So speaking of academic scholarships, then you're valedictorian of this enormous high school of 13 graduating class, right? You get a academic scholarship then for being valedictorian, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So where did you end up going to college?
I got accepted into Oklahoma State.
Which is in Stillwater.
Stillwater, yep. Mm-hmm. Just business management, basic, but, trying to knock out my basic classes to start. My mom usually let me do she let me experience things. She let me fail. She let me try to do things on my own. So I actually, signed up for all my own classes, did all that, and I did it completely wrong. Like I don't think I had a 7 a.m. algebra class that I never went to.
Okay, so you're a freshman in college in Oklahoma State.
Yep.
And so valedictorian shows up to school, and does it sound like you bomb?
Yeah, I lost that scholarship in probably about 3 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you lose your scholarship to Oklahoma State. What's your next step from there?
I vividly recall that I'd moved in with a buddy, was sitting on the couch one day, hadn't told my mom that I basically wasn't going back to Oklahoma State. It was probably too big of a transition from a graduating class of 13 to Stillwater, even, it's not a huge university,
sure,
but it was still kind of a lot. I'm sitting on the couch in my buddy's apartment in another town, and the phone rings to the apartment. I didn't have a cell phone at that time, and it's my mom.
Sure.
She's like, I go, hello? I'm like, yeah, that's what I thought. So my mom worked for a salt plant at that time. So she's always been a hard worker, up at 4:30 in the morning, at work at 4:30 in the morning half the time.
Really?
So she worked at what was called a solar salt plant for Cargill. Basically, I had to go work for her at that point. So I was driving tractor again, reclaiming salt production, like salt pellets for water softeners and stuff. So I did that for like 3 months until I got accepted down in Texas. So I got a job down there and was kind of following some right-of-way work with the gas pipeline. And then went to school.
So when you say down in Texas, were you going to school there as well?
School, yeah. I went to a junior college for a little bit, then University of Texas.
Okay.
And was doing right-of-way work for a pipeline. So it's basically like running title. Every railroad, or at that time we were running a fiber optic line from a 100-mile track south of Waco. And you have to go find out who owns these little pieces of land and ask them if you can run your fiber optic line along an existing easement. So I was running title at courthouses and stuff like that. And that was kind of my first little peek into the real estate world and land and all of that.
Did you get a lesson in how to run title? And is that what you've learned from there? Did you take anything away from there at that job?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in, identifying who the true property owners are, understanding how that works. But every state's different. Mm-hmm. But I did get to talk to landowners and get to talk to people that in negotiations, like for instance, if you're running 100 yards across somebody's land, everybody gets paid differently. You have that starting price, but there's a counter offer.
So you're negotiating these prices?
Not when I started out, but by the end of that term I was. Yeah.
So how old are you during this process here?
19, 20.
So 20 years old, in that range there, you're negotiating.
By the end of it, yeah, I was 19, 20.
So at 20 years old, you're negotiating some big money contracts here. Bigger for a 20-year-old.
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of income were you making during that time, if you don't mind me asking?
I thought I was rich. I was making right around $75,000 a year.
At age 20?
At age 20.
And you're a student?
I'm a student still. Okay. Yep. But part-time student. I wasn't going full-time at that time because I was making $75,000. But then I realized that it was it's project work, so it's feast or famine. Really, you move from one town to the next, wherever the project is, and that wasn't the way of life that I wanted. And so that's when I decided to move out to Phoenix. My sister lives out here. She had a baby. I'll go out there and check it out for a little bit. That was 17 years ago.
So did you finish school at Texas then?
ASU. I came back and finished out. Well,
so you came to Arizona State. I'm a Sun Devil, so that's why I had to bring it up, right? So nice. You're at ASU. Tell me about graduation.
ASU graduation? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't know. I went to a couple.
All right.
Graduation parties and whatnot, but I actually got full-time into real estate when I had about 16 hours left of school and ended up never graduating college.
Okay, so you're 16 hours away from graduating, and you decide, I'm going to leave school, I'm going to go full-time into real estate.
I don't think it was that conscious of a decision. It was, I'm going to take this semester off and save up some money, then come back, and I just never went back. So
you had some success.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So the reason why I bring that up, George, is over the last couple interviews we've done, there's a common theme that a lot of the most successful people that I've interviewed on this podcast either never went to school, went to a semester of school, or never graduated school. And so before we go any further, I just want to say I am not anti-college education. All right. I think a lot of people feel that I'm preaching that you shouldn't go to school. I just want people to understand that school does not equal success. You still have to put in a tremendous amount of work. And I think a lot of times what happens is people lean too hard on, if I don't go to college, I won't be successful. And I feel like that's so far from the truth, it's ridiculous. And so I want to throw that caveat out there because I received a lot of emails over the last couple of weeks about this saying, you're anti-school. What is your take on that?
Well, I don't think you need a degree, obviously, to be successful. Mm-hmm. I think you should always be learning. I think that education is crucial, but it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a degree. I'm always learning. I'm always reading a book. I'm always listening to podcasts. I'm always listening to audiobooks. It's almost to the point where, like, my kids, they don't like riding with daddy because the car doesn't go forward unless I have an audiobook on.
University on wheels.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely.
I think I'm with you in that sense that people put a lot of weight in degrees and some people lean back on it or think that that's what they need to do in order to advance in life. And that's just not true.
It's kind of ironic that a lot of these people that I've been talking to run very, very successful businesses. They're entrepreneurs. Some of them retired in their 30s. And college wasn't the answer for them. College was a tool, but like you said, education's education. You don't have to go to university and go deeply into debt to get that education.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Okay. So I wanted to get that out there because we've been dealing with this. So I want to back up a little bit. All right. Tell me about bartending. Because when you and I first started hanging out, I saw you tossing bottles up in the air and flipping them and doing all these things across your back. And I'm like, what in the heck? Where did this come from? And then I found out you were a bartender.
Yeah, so that's how I worked my way through early years of college and, on into real estate too, was that carryover for the income once real estate started booming. But both my wife and I bartended for all through ASU days. I was bartending. So, yeah, I did some of the flair shows, flair competitions. I've been known to hang out in a bar or two, but what I always told my friends and before Jen and I got together was, not only it was a way to meet girls, really is why you got into it, right? It was
fair enough.
I'll just be honest.
Yeah.
Every girl in the place eventually had to or needed to talk to you at some point. So if they wanted a drink.
Yes.
So that was kind of my theory in originally going into bartending. So, but yeah, Jen and I, that's how I met my wife. She was a bartender and I was a bartender. She came in and ordered, some shots and tipped me ridiculous amount of money. And I was like, man, I want to.
What was that amount of money?
$40.
Okay.
For a round of shots.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I think I love this girl.
Yeah.
So needless to say, I set my sights in and eventually.
Perfect. All right. So I like this. So now we're going to transition into real estate. So you're doing real estate in the very beginning along with bartending. Is that to supplement the income because you were still learning the business, or did you start making a ton of money day one?
I waited probably a year and a half before I quit the bartending into real estate. So I got licensed 2006. I was bartending up until it was probably just about a year. 2007, I quit, and then we really launched the team in that point.
Okay. So your team is you and your wife in the very beginning?
Yeah, in the very beginning. I also read a lot of books, so I was quick to leverage, get the things off my plate that I didn't want to do or what I wasn't good at. So we hired a TC pretty quickly, administrative assistant fairly quickly after making a little bit of money in real estate. Okay, so you're making a little bit of money, not crushing it in the beginning, right? You're still going through the hustle. 2006, my first year, I did 13 transactions. I think I net $55,000. Okay. And so that first year, tell me about the hustle, because I think it's important that people understand, people see the Laughton Team today and they see, you have 30 agents and they think, oh man, an overnight success, right? Yeah, nothing overnight about it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that, you get that, oh man, you're lucky, where you're at now. But it's taken a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication. When Jen and I got into the business, it wasn't, well, we had a little bit of period there where it was a good time, but things were shifting in the market at that time. So 2006, 2007, the traditional real estate market was going down, right? The general public knows the crash. Think of the crash like 2008, 2009, but we really saw the shift. And I think I was fortunate that I didn't have a strong base of traditional real estate clients, a traditional database that I could actually see this shift coming sooner than others, or wasn't necessarily hanging on to the past that much. So 2006, a lot of the things that we were doing, a lot of the loans that we had been getting people approved on were going away. I was noticing more and more foreclosures, REO properties at that time. And I told Jen, I'm like, we need to be positioned in default, not knowing how big it was going to get. So instead of representing Mr. and Mrs. buyer seller, I went out after institutional clients. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Wells Fargo, banks that were going to get default properties back.
So just to put this in layman terms for me as well, you're saying you went away from the newlywed couple buying a house to the bank-owned homes.
To the bank owners, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that's what I focused on. So after doing those 13 deals in 2006, early 2007, February 2007, I said, let's focus on just default. Let's go that direction. Let's put all our eggs in one basket like you're not supposed to do. And let's go after it. We were so new in the business, it didn't really matter. I didn't have that many eggs anyway.
So you were risking a lot, but you didn't have a ton to risk.
Yeah, there wasn't a ton to risk. We had saved up bartending. We'd saved up about $50,000 at that time.
Really?
Yeah.
You saved up $50,000 cash.
$50,000 cash, yeah, bartending.
Okay, so I want to focus on this for a second. All right, so you were starting your business in real estate, right? And so instead of starting it broke, you hustled and saved up $50,000 between the two of you and just had this to the side. Why did you do that?
I guess it felt like
because that's not normal.
Yeah, I mean,
right now, George, 6 out of 10 people can't write a check for $1,000. All right, so why? And then I just want to know what made you decide. You know what? We're going to save about $50,000 cash.
I've always been, and Jen too. Like Jen would live in a box with me. Like she's great, and it's not that we're diligent, focused savers or we have this great budget. I actually probably should talk to you more about budgeting.
Yeah, we are. We're going to have a big conversation.
So we know the difference between wants and needs. And do we really, really need this? Jen and I have driven the same cars, for the last 7-8 years. It's just one of those things that we're content. We're happy with the things we have. We could go out, get that nicer house. We could go out, get that nicer vehicle. We could go buy that boat, but we're happy. So we just don't, and we save. So
I love it. That's huge because most people wouldn't think that. They would see you and they just automatically picture, oh, I can't imagine what their house looks like. And, I see you pull up in the gym in a normal car. I've been to your house. It's, it's a great house, but it's
fancy.
It's nothing. It's a normal house because you're mostly at work.
Yep.
Right. All right. Very cool. So we're talking about this hustle now. So in the beginning, when you're starting anything, right? It's a hustle. It's a risk. It's scary. It's not easy. Nothing was ever given to you, right? How do you navigate through that, what I call the mess of 2008, maybe to 2010, 11 area? How did you stay above water?
That was some of our biggest years. I mean, obviously we're outpacing them now, but we positioned well. And I'll tell you, we'll be positioned even better in the next down market because we know what to do. We made some good money then. We were able to save up some good reserves, but we'll get rich on the next one.
You're ready for it.
I'm ready. I'm excited for it. But
that's very cool. That's confident.
Yeah.
But the reason why you have confidence is going back to you learned lessons from last time, took those with you. And so are you strategically now putting yourself in that position? Because eventually what goes up comes down. So are you intentionally putting things in places so when that does happen, you're ready to pounce?
Yeah. And what we would have done differently. So we got heavily positioned in default listings, so foreclosure listings, institutional clients. But, we put it all on the line then. Back then, when a house was foreclosed on, we had to have that conversation with the people in the house. So that was tough in that sense, right? We had to give them cash for keys is what it was called. We gave them a check to move out. Who floated all the money for that? Getting the house cleaned up, utilities turned on, pool service done. That was Jen and I.
So that was the $50,000.
And that was gone in 60 days, something like it. It was crazy. Once we got our first client, they sent us so many properties that we burned through our reserves in no time.
Wow.
Yeah. At one point, the highest, I think, between myself and a business, we brought on a business partner. At one point, we were into the banks for $500,000.
Really?
It was these potentially insolvent institutions owe us that much money. And if they went underwater, I mean, who would be the last people to get paid back?
You.
The agent.
So are you slightly stressed during this time?
Yeah. Well, Jen was.
Yeah.
We were close to missing a couple mortgage payments, but it was right there at that tipping point. Like it kept on bringing in new inventory. So you could see, I'm like, babe, just wait. This is going to tip. I promise you. This is all going to tip. And as long as this keeps coming in, as long as the new inventory keeps coming in, we'll keep paying out. But we just got to dial in our bookkeeping processes to make sure we get paid back, because their timeline for an electric bill, Freddie Mac's timeline for an electric bill to get you paid back was 4 months, 5 months sometimes.
Okay. Wow.
So we were just waiting around. Then we get a $75,000 repayment check once a quarter,
Wow.
Yeah. It was nuts.
So stressful. I mean, stressful because you're like tipping point. So tell me about, I call it the hockey stick. This is one of the things that I use a lot is, your hockey stick. When did you hit that curve of success in your business? Meaning you start off, it's going, your tipping point, your hockey stick, where all of a sudden you make that adjustment and now you start shooting up. Tell me what it was and then what did that feel like and how did you manage it?
I think there's been, since we've been in real estate in the last decade, there's been shifts in our market, obviously. So going from that default, we basically came into this business with one niche in one area. We had to completely reinvent ourselves in 2013. We had to shift out of that over into this other market. And not a lot of agents did that successfully. Like we were one of the top agents in this foreclosure market. Now, how are we now shifting over and changing who we are and what our message is? And basically starting over was 2013. So I think I had two hockey sticks, if you will.
Okay.
Right? So once in the down market, it was once we hit our max capacity of listings, we had a full team on. At that time, we had 25 individuals on the team. We were about 300 listings, and we were just cranking, moving, right? Mm-hmm. And then once all that kept flowing, properties were selling, and we started to come out of it, 2011, 2012. Things started getting a lot better. And then basically it shut off like a faucet one day. We knew it was coming.
Were you geared up for it again?
Ready. Yeah.
Okay.
I knew once it shut. So we had an office in the central corridor at that time. And that was strategically positioned to be, so the way that banks assign properties was based on radius to your office. Mm-hmm. So in order to get the most bandwidth, the widest area, if we were centrally located, then we could hit most of the valley if it's a 15-mile radius, right? So that's what we did. Once that was over and we moved back to the traditional real estate, I want to be back where we're from, Northwest Valley. And we shifted up here and then created a traditional team because it looks a lot different. The team we had before was very administrative based. So it's a different personality profile.
You're dealing with banks.
And the people on the staff are processing essentially, mm-hmm. right? So it's a very different personality profile than sales. So we made the conscious decision to dissolve that team, move up here and basically start over. So, and that's what we did.
Okay. I didn't know that. That's really, really impressive. So you basically almost started over like a whole new business when you built it up in the beginning. And I wouldn't call it, so a couple of guys in the podcast talk about their extreme failures and what they learned from that. I don't think you've ever hit extreme failure. I think you just were smart enough to pivot before there was failure. Because like you said, a lot of agents didn't come out of it, right? They were so institutionalized with the down market and all of a sudden it goes back up and they don't know how to adjust for that.
Well, that's it. I mean, adapting quickly, even if you have a massive ship that you have to correct. Like if I've got to correct this whole thing, like I know I could do it and I just got to sit down and bang it out in a week. You know what I mean? Like if that's what's got to happen, you got to adapt quickly or you're going to be left behind. And that's what we do. Like we just adapted. Jen and I moved back in. We moved our office in our house from having a office, on the third floor at 16th Street in Northern for the last number of years. Said, okay, we're shifting. We go back here. We bring our assistant with us, and that's it. And we start over. One agent came with us, Jason Sequeira, and
so wow. So you did start over. I mean, It was like reinventing whole business. So you could say this is the Laughton Team 3.0.
Yeah. I guess that's a good way.
Okay. And if you do come up with that, I need royalties on that.
Okay, deal.
Are you tired of living paycheck to paycheck? Are you lying in bed awake at night wondering how you're going to pay the next bill? How you're going to save for kids' college? How you're going to pay off that debt? And when are you going to take that dream vacation that you guys have been talking about forever? Well, stop worrying about it and head on over to awesomemoneycourse.com and see why students all over the world are now taking back control of their money. They're now in the driver's seat of their financial future. awesomemoneycourse.com. awesomemoneycourse.com. You haven't mentioned this. I'm going to mention it for you. So you have been labeled the top 1% agent in the United States of America, and you're the youngest real estate agent ever to be labeled into RE/MAX's Hall of Fame. Why is that?
Well, we got there quick. I think a lot of it was the numbers. To get into RE/MAX Hall of Fame, it's based once you hit $1 million in commissions, mm-hmm. then you're into the Hall of Fame. I hit that in my first 2 years in the business. Okay. So the quickest and one of the youngest to hit the Hall of Fame.
So I guess I should ask the question better. Why did you get there and the same agent or the same agents that you went through real estate school with didn't?
Focus, a lot of it, routine, sticking to that. So, during the thick of it, Jen and I have never been scared to work. I mean, we were basically doing a rotation on shifts at that office at 16th Street. Mm-hmm. We had a futon. Like, we would sleep in the office, no kids at that time. It was high-fiving sometimes on the way out. She's a late night person. I'm an early morning person. She would go till 2, 3 in the morning. I'd be up at 3 in the morning, high-fiving on the way out, or staying there, sleeping there, and getting up and doing it all over again. And that's what we did we didn't take a vacation for 6 years, man. We didn't get to enjoy a lot of the things that we were doing. And honestly, maybe this is what I should have stayed in college for, but I didn't know how to do a P&L. I didn't know balance sheets. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I wasn't even sure we were making money other than the money in our account was going up. So it wasn't until after all that kind of slowed down that I became a bit better business person. And once I learned I had to get my money back from those banks too, it made you learn accounting a little bit more.
Now, how did you learn? Obviously you didn't learn it in school because you're 16 hours short and that wasn't your degree anyway. But where did you learn to do, P&Ls, and where did you learn to manage a business, run a business, grow a business? Where did you learn to lead 30 agents to become successful themselves? Where did you learn all these traits?
A lot of reading, a lot of audiobooks, but the most beneficial thing that I've done for my business, hands down, is coaching with somebody else that is where I want to be. So when that started, it was somebody that was in default REO listings. It was somebody that sold 100 million in real estate. Now it's somebody that sells 500 million in real estate. Like, it's always, who do I want to be? Who do I want to mentor me? Somebody that's been there, somebody that is doing it, and somebody that understands it. So I think that has been probably the biggest factor in our growth, is just listening, learning, and weekly coaching calls with whoever that is at the time. So right now, I think I'm coached by 3 different people. The P&L side of it, I went out there and I found the guy who handles bookkeeping for 100 different agents. And so that way, how valuable is it that I can say, well, I don't know what my P&L needs to look like, but here's access to my accounts, back-end access to my accounts. You go in there, let's scrub the information. I'm going to do a 1-hour call with you every month, and we're going to go through my P&L. And since you do 140 other agents, tell me what I look like next to these other agents. And then the guy, now we've grown together, he now has, thousands of real estate agents and other agents that are top producers within the country that he handles P&Ls for all their bookkeeping. So I can sit down and say, okay, what does my expenses look like compared to agents that have the same size team as I do? What does it look like on my cost of sales? What percentage should that be? Where can I add? Where should I subtract? And that's been huge and valuable in getting to that budget.
And where do you think you got the idea to go with that? What I'm trying to draw out of you is, why doesn't everybody do this?
I don't know. It's what I always tell people to do, yeah. Right? I think that, people don't understand that they're not treating their work, especially agents in our field, they're not treating it as a business. They're just going about it from paycheck to paycheck, just like a lot of people do. It's closing to closing. But I want to have something sellable, something duplicatable in the end. And I wanted something also to pay me when I was on vacation. I wanted to still make money when I wasn't around. I talk to agents that are still doing a lot of production. They have big teams. But at the end of it, I didn't want just a job. Like, I wanted to have something. I wanted to have a business. And I think that's where people miss in this industry a lot, is that they have a job. If you're out there, we're grinding every day, but you got to be working on your business. So when I get up 4:30 in the morning to 6:30 in the morning, is really developing the business, moving it forward. What's that next vision piece that I'm working on, and focusing on one thing at a time. And so when I get up in the morning, the first thing that I do is I open my journal. I don't work out in the mornings. I work out in the evenings.
So you do a daily journal? Daily journal,
daily log, daily gratitude. I tried meditation for a while. Mm-hmm. It's not my cup of tea. Okay. I did guided meditation through, I forget what it was, Headspace or something like that. And to sit there and not think for 10 minutes was stressful.
For some people, it's really, really hard. Yeah. So you do a journal every single day? Journal. I start out with, I write my one thing down at the top of the page. My one thing being, what is the one thing that I can work on today that makes everything else easier, or, that I can advance the business in.
So that's the top of the page.
Would you mind, just for listeners' sake, giving me maybe an example? If you wouldn't mind. Yeah.
Right now, I focus on higher level production stuff. So not just the one buyer or seller. What's the channel accounts, what I call it. So what's the account that I can land today that is going to bring us continued business? A lot like a foreclosure account, but today that's a builder account, something along those lines.
And so now let me ask you this. The one thing that you're putting every day at the top, is it the same usually every day then while you're working on it, or is it different every day?
It's the same every day
Okay.
until I move that forward.
Until you move that forward.
So the one thing, what am I focusing on?
Okay.
That I need to move forward today, and then breaking that down into bite-sized pieces. So after that, I'll write down 3 things that I need to accomplish that day. Because here's the thing. As soon as I walk in the office doors, we all get caught up in that whirlwind. We all get working and lose focus of actually doing things that are income producing. So I want to make sure that I focus on 3 things that are income producing that day, or that at the end of the day when I lay my head on the pillow, I know that I feel I accomplished something. Because have you ever been in that day like, man, I worked all day, I did stuff all day long, and I still don't feel like I got anything done.
Absolutely.
So that's why I write those down. I got to do these, even if it's just I got to call Peach to schedule the podcast, right? Like, I don't care. I want to check off these 3 things.
Okay.
Because then it makes me feel better at the end of the night. And usually they're bigger things than that. Like, I got to deal with this, this, and this in order to move the one thing forward.
Okay. So, and then you do your 3 things. You have your one thing, then the 3
things.
The task level type stuff
Task
usually.
level, yep.
And then you do a journal or a log.
Journal, I do not like a journal in that sense. Like, I just kind of sometimes random writing, just kind of get stuff out of my head. Sometimes it's tasks, sometimes it's to-dos, but I get stressed out when I've got all these things in my head and I just want to get them down. So it's not necessarily a journal. I'm not like in there writing, what my day looked like the day before or anything along those lines.
Okay.
I'm just kind of mentally dumping, and that's what I do.
And do you feel like when you're doing that, more ideas come out of your head that you didn't know were in there?
Yeah. I have to show you my Evernote one of these days.
You do it in Evernote?
Evernote.
Okay. I do something very similar. And I've been doing it now for about 6 months. But one of the things I do is I also journal, kind of talking about not what did yesterday look like, but maybe what did I learn? What am I working on? What am I frustrated with? Now I go back and I look 6 months ago. Sometimes I feel like I haven't had any success. And then I look and go, yes, I have. Look where I was 6 months ago. It's kind of a reminder. So let me ask you this. Would you be willing to do this? And you can say no, but you're on the podcast, so I think you're going to say yes. Can we put together a PDF cheat sheet that looks kind of like your morning routine? And we'll put it on in the show notes and the links, and so people can get started with it. Because I think they're envisioning what you're talking about, but why not just give it to them?
Yeah, I've got a pretty good one I'll share with you.
Okay, cool. So you've heard it. There'll be show notes or there'll be links to the show notes, and that'll be in there. There'll be a free PDF download on how George starts off his day. So, all right. So let's see here. I remember we were talking one time, and you told me about your philosophy on no. So when somebody tells you no, that was never good enough for you. And I remember you were telling me like no just means, and I'll let you finish. Yeah.
Well, no to me, I guess I just don't hear them a lot of times. Like, I just kind of breeze right over it. And it depends on what it is. But for the most part, they're objections.
Mm-hmm.
It's an objection. And sometimes people's knee-jerk reaction is to say no to things. One of the things, another book I read, that just say yes, like commit to things. But when somebody tells me no, I just try to push harder. Like I'm focused on getting them to that yes. When somebody tells me we can't do something, it can't be done. I mean, just yesterday I had to jump in and help out with getting a transaction closed. That was the first step in closing 4 other transactions.
Sure.
And here it is, the final hour. Like, we can't do anything after the counting closes.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at 4:45 and we still got them all done. Like, it's just one of those things, like, everybody else says no.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, it can happen, guys.
I remember you had told me, you're like, for me, no is just, okay, a no means I didn't explain it well enough. I didn't ask well enough. So I just need to ask a better way or find out a better way to explain it, because there is a yes involved somewhere. I just got to find it.
Just got to turn it around.
Just got to turn it around. So I like that, because I was thinking, so many times, knee-jerk reaction is to hear no. So if you're in sales, you're doing something and you hear no, your take on it was, well, all no means is you didn't explain it well enough. So how do I need to explain it better to get to that yes? Because it's there somewhere.
It is. And it's just, you got to keep searching for that sometimes.
Okay. So that was something that I thought was really cool. What is your take on community? Because I've been involved in a lot of your community events. You just you sponsored a 5K last weekend. I've been to where you rent out a movie theater. You do that for, you invite a bunch of kids. You do blood drives all the time. And I've been where you rent out an entire restaurant for a community event. Why do you do those things?
Jen, my wife has a huge heart. Like, she does it without even thinking twice. It's not for any other reason than that's the kind of person she is. She makes me a better person in that sense. So I would like to sit here and take credit for it, but we probably wouldn't get a lot of blood drives done if it was up to me. Jen's the driving force behind that. So what I look at and why do we do it? Usually when I look at things, it either has to be profitable or fulfilling, right? Is what I always say. Once you start giving back, that's really when you kind of start feeling more fulfilled. And that's what these events, being able to help change people's lives, not just in the charity events, but, agents, like the people that we bring onto the team. I've got, 24-year-old people that are making $350,000 a year that didn't think that was even possible. And that's the fun stuff. I mean, that's the things that just, you separate yourself from that P&L at that point. The money continues to come, but if you're helping people grow and expand and then they see the value and you continue to add value, and that's the good stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. So I don't think I've told you this. Little side note is that you just brought something up that reminded me. So I remember doing these volunteer Financial Peace University classes in 2012, 2013, right around there. And you and Jen took one of them. Yep. I didn't really know who you were. I didn't know actually who you were at all, actually, until you went into that class. And so I did one of those classes and I ended up doing 5 of these classes. And then it turned into one-on-one coaching at my house where people were coming over to the house for dinner and I was just helping them create a budget, pay off debt. And I had no idea that it was a business idea, right? I wasn't even thinking along those lines. It was kind of fulfilling. When you help somebody finally stop living paycheck to paycheck or pay off debt, it was fulfilling to me. And I remember you had asked me, you said, hey, I've heard that you started one of those classes and you've been, helping people at your house. And I said, yeah. And then the next question you asked is, so when is that going to be your next business? And I remember the light kind of went off in my head going, yeah. So to your credit, you don't just help real estate agents develop to be real estate agents. That was probably the kick in the pants. That was, because it wasn't even in my mind before that. Yeah. So this was in 2014 that you probably said that to me. And Money Peach started in 2015. Yeah, about 4 months after that, I started from a kitchen table. But the long story short is, it was I shared this with somebody else on the podcast before, but it was George Laughton that said, so that's good that you're providing value and helping people. Sounds like it's a business. When are you going to turn it into a business?
Well, let's say, identify. I think it's being able to identify and act on an opportunity, know when they're up, when it is and what it is, and being able to turn something into that is fulfilling and you're passionate about into something that is profitable, an honorable profit. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely not. Okay, we're wrapping up here. There's one other question I wanted to ask you about because I think you're also a master of it. Relationships. What's your take on relationships? Because I feel, just from knowing you over the last 4 years now, that you and your wife are masters at building relationships. Because I look at people in my life and I say, who do I know that has no enemies? Who do I know that people look to and they just point and say, that is a good couple. That is a good person. That is a good. How do you maintain that? And how do you build relationships? What's your thought process on that? Because I would say you're one of the people I would call a master at relationship building.
Oh, man, thank you. So for Jen and I, for our relationship, obviously, all relationships have their ups and downs, but we've always got along into the core. Like, I always know that I'm not going, like, she's stuck with me, my ride or die, you know what I mean? Yeah. So that's never a question, like it's like, we'll get through it, whatever life brings us. With other people, I think it is one, like, I truly want to help somebody, Jen too, like Jen's just like, big heart. That's who she is. And then for me, it is listening and figuring out what can I do to help somebody in whatever they're facing, whatever it is. And we don't talk bad about people. We don't.
Never. I've never heard you once say anything bad about anybody.
It's just who we are, man. I don't know. It's, I think what shifted, not necessarily shifted Jen and I's, but a good book was The 5 Love Languages, to learning that even in business, it's helped me understanding what people respond to, if it's this agent needs words of affirmation, they need acts of service, whatever that is, and being able to build strong relationships with those people. And truthful, being honest with people. They know they're going to get 100% honesty from me. I might not say it. I'm not direct in it, but I'm going to let you know how things are. and we're going to work through whatever we need to together.
I think when you're honest right in the very beginning, it avoids the need to having to ever say anything later on behind their back or saying anything negative because it was out right away.
And that's conversations too. Like, I don't let things fester. Like, I don't try to solve anything over text message or email. Like, I pick up the phone, man. Nothing gets solved with the text message. So that's what I teach the agents too. I'm like, guys, you just got to pick up the phone and make a call.
Wow.
Work through anything that way.
Okay, so we're wrapping up here. I got a couple questions I want to ask. Going back to, you talked a lot about reading, okay? Can you name your top books that you would recommend, not just a real estate agent, but anybody who's getting ready to start their own business, or maybe has started their business, they're a year or two in it and they're struggling, they're trying to figure out what can I go out there and learn? What would you, if you could gift away some books, which ones would you gift away?
4 Disciplines of Execution, by far was a game changer in my business. It shifted things where we went from being an average team into a top producing team. That was by far my number 1 book. Number 2, Rocket Fuel, understanding how to complement what I do well and bringing that person on. So a visionary integrator combo. That's been a great one. I'm really into Tools of Titans right now. Okay. So I'm loving that just because it's a fun read. But I think that kind of, you can break it up and there's just so much good content in there. Bold, another good one. I like anything Simon Sinek. Yep. It's just start with why, leaders eat last, things along those lines. So
okay, so all of the books he just mentioned, I'm going to have links to them in the show notes, a link to every single book he just mentioned, the author, so you guys can just have direct access to those. What about audiobook? What's your favorite audiobook right now? Because I like audiobooks too, but sometimes I don't like the audiobooks. I don't like the sound of who's ever talking on it.
Yeah, just got through with Tony Robbins one. I forget what it was called now. That one's pretty good. What else is another good one? Now I'm drawing a blank right now.
All right. So whatever he tells me after we stop the podcast, we'll have links to all the audiobooks, any book that he recommended, we'll put in there. So if you don't have the funds to go out and go, spend a bunch of money on, getting an education, or you're just not there yet, or you don't have the time to go back to school, pick up a book, pick up an audiobook, pick up a book, learn something. I mean, you heard here that George was 16 hours away from graduating college, but yet he still is learning every single day. He never stops learning, never stops reading. All right. So lastly, George, a couple things. Are you a coffee drinker? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Choice of beer.
I go to Stella a lot.
Okay, Stella. When you were a bartender, what was your favorite drink to make?
Favorite drink to make or drink?
Make and then drink. How about that?
Okay, both. I drank a lot of Crown Royal in those days.
Okay.
I also poured a lot of Crown Royal, so it's probably same.
All right. And then what's the home screen right now on your phone?
Home screen on my phone is actually, I usually have my first, whatever quarter goals there are on it. So whatever my quarterly goal is for sales. But right now I actually have a little art piece on there that it basically says things to focus on, and then it just a bunch of circles and it says happy. So why are we doing all this? Like, I'm usually staring at my goals every day, but then I remembered, man, what is the point of all this? Just be happy.
Okay, so real quick before we wrap up, I was in your office and I was snooping. Sorry, you were on the phone, you weren't paying attention, and I noticed you have a goals board. And so if you sit at your desk in your chair, you have your computers right in front of you. Then right behind those, you have a goals board. Why?
So I see them every 15 minutes. I see those bad boys. So I have, my goals on there, my annual goals on there. I also have other things to help remind me what it's all about. So one of my favorite quotes is, there's always more great ideas than there is capacity to execute. So knowing to stay focused on my one thing, stay focused on the direction I'm going, and not get too distracted on the other things, because there's always so many great ideas and directions to go. And that's part of the entrepreneur in me. Like, I love the next shiny object, but you got to stay focused.
Okay. And then I was paying attention in your office again. I looked to the right and there was a giant board that said Y board.
Yeah. So my Y board is, I encourage my agents to kind of give me what their why is. Like, why are you doing this? What's your big goal this year? But more importantly, not just goal, but why do you want to reach that goal? So sometimes it's pay off $50,000 in debt. Sometimes it's, I need to get my kid braces. There's all kinds of different things.
Sure.
So whatever that is, whatever they give me while I'm coaching them goes up on that board, because that's what I know I got to get them to.
Wow. And so again, why doesn't everybody do that?
Y'all should. I don't know.
Absolutely. Goal setting is huge. All right, George, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. This was hugely beneficial for me because I feel like I just got a 1-hour coaching session with you. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.
And what's the next thing we can see for the Laughton Team? Where can we find out more about you? I should ask you that. Where can we find out?
LaughtonTeam.com.
Okay, and we'll have links to that.
Yep. And then that's probably the best place to go. If you're looking for real estate, it's myphoenixhomesearch.com. And then you can always email me, george@LaughtonTeam.com.
Really? Just send you a direct email. Okay. All right, George, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And all the show notes, all the links to everything we talked about will be found at moneypeach.com/session42. That's moneypeach.com/session42. Thanks again, George, for being here. And we'll see you guys next week for another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. Take care.
See you.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, anything that George and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session89. That's moneypeach.com/session89. Special thanks goes out to my producers, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, this show would not be possible. Stay tuned next week for episode 90, where we talk about your favorite thing in the world, budgeting. There's 4 different types of budgets. We are going to be talking about the budget burn down as a new and improved method for some of you.
Money has a link to happiness, and spending money, there are things that make people happy. You should embrace that. It's not about just cutting every expense all the time and maximizing. I mean, we're not trying to live through a survival budget throughout our life all the time. There's a balance that's needed between enjoying life, going out and doing things and hitting our goals.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Boom, da-ba-doom, boom, da-ba-doom.